Hello, this is Kelsey Livingston from the Baton Rouge Gallery. I am here today with a couple of digital artists from our artist membership. This video is an addition to our artist in residencies uh, interview slash panel slash art whatever uh, series that we have going on here at the gallery. Today I have Jamie Baldridge and Leslie Elliottsmith coming in to talk with me, not in here, but in their residencies, to talk with me about their work in digital practice. So let's go ahead and bring them on. Here we go. Hello, how are you guys today?
Doing well.
Doing good.
Great. Thank you for coming on and chatting with me as we stumble through learning new technology and trying to be as graceful as we can during that part. Yeah. All right. So why don't both of you, we'll start with Leslie first, as ladies first, introduce yourself and tell me a little bit about what you do.
I'm Leslie Elliottsmith, and I do a lot of digital photography. I have two different cameras, an infrared camera and a regular, they're both Canons, Canon 5D Mark II, and it's converted to infrared 720 nanometers. And then I have a new Canon R series camera, which is the mirrorless one. And so I'll take images from all over the place, from my studio with people and out in the environment, anywhere I'm going, and then I stitch those together very much like I used to do with my paintings. So coming from a painting and printmaking background, I look at photography as elements to put together.
Fantastic. Thank you. All right, Jamie, tell us a little bit about what you do.
Wow. I'm Jamie Baldridge. I am a digital mixed media artist. I work in photography, film, sculpture, installation, as well as painting. I don't know how much more there is to say about that.
Great. Thank you. All right. I have a couple of questions here I would like to ask you both. We'll start with a few individual questions, and then I'll have questions for both of you to chime in on. So let's see. Leslie, you told me a little bit about the what behind your work. Can you tell me a little bit about the why?
Yeah. So all of my work, going way back, even when I was in graduate school, based on stories, and the stories, for the most part, were political, somehow initiated by what was going on in the political realm, and that hasn't really changed much. So in the past 2 years, it's been a lot about the environment and what's happening with the environment, and then also some of what's happening with immigration and personal rights in the current political environment. So I start with a sort of a concept, an idea, and build it from there. And as I'm working on it, I'll typically have some word in mind that describes what the end goal is going to be. And that may become the title, or it may change when I finish it.
Fantastic. All right. Very similar question to you, Jamie. Can you tell us a little bit about the why behind what it is that you do in the studio?
I'm not sure why. I know this. I'm a storyteller, much the same way as Leslie. I started as a writer, and I've kept writing and still write. So all of the work that you see is generally from a longer narrative, and often I include a portion of that narrative to go along with the work. But for since I was a kid, I've digested and adored philosophy, theology, politics, anthropology, just all the subjects that humans sort of use to describe themselves, folklore, all that. So my work sort of comes from a background of this sort of academic study of multiple subjects, and that all gets mixed into stories that I like to tell. and these fictions get brought into life as films or images or sculptures.
Awesome. Fantastic. So, all right. I want to know, as an artist who has a digital component to your work, for both of you, what is it like working with commercial galleries? Now, I know in working with Baton Rouge Gallery, we're a little bit of a different beast, right? Being that we're an artist-run co-op, and the way the artist membership is selected is by the other artist members. Now, in other commercial gallery spaces, for those who don't know, often when you have a commercial gallery, it's usually an owner or a pair of owners who have their idea of what they want to show in the space. I want to know, when it comes to the digital art world, do you find it harder or easier to show in those spaces, and why? Feel free, whomever, to jump in and tackle the question.
Well, in my case, the gallery that I'm with, Lemieux, they took me on as a painter way long ago. I've been with them for over 30 years. So,
in this digital stuff,
right. So I didn't start doing photography until, I mean, I took photography in college and I had cameras, but I used it mostly to take shots of my artwork, as opposed to making artwork out of it. So in 2010, I sort of started moving into photography, and they didn't have a problem with it. So it's worked out real well.
That's great. What about you, Jamie? Have you had any difficulty?
I've not had a problem. I work with about 12 galleries worldwide right now, and honestly, the American galleries that I work with, whether it's San Francisco or New York, they generally prefer the photography, and I'm putting that in air quotes because they're not photographs really, but it looks enough like a photograph where people are comfortable dealing with it. My first gallery was Vicky Bassetti in New Orleans, and she was a photography gallery. So it was nice being in exhibitions with wonderful artists like Josephine Sakabo and others. But as my career sort of moved on, most of my European galleries and Middle East galleries and exhibitions in Asia, they're fine with video, they're fine with installation. They've generally seen me as Jamie Baldridge, the artist, and not Jamie Baldridge, the photographer. That tends to be something that happens stateside. There's a little bit more of I would say a categorization that happens, I find, with galleries here in the States. That's not as common with the galleries, at least the galleries that I work with in Europe, whether it's in the UK or continental Europe or broader. So it's never really been an issue. So there's always a place to show whatever it is I'm making.
Wow, that's amazing. That kind of dovetails into my next question. When it comes to you, the artist, and your artwork, and how you view digital art in general, do either of you feel like there's a hard distinction between the more commercial aspects of digital photo manipulation, or even just straight digital media, or is it more of a gradient? Like, where is the cutoff line for you between art and commercial? Do either of you have any thoughts on that?
Leslie, you can chime in first.
Thanks. Okay, well, my husband's a photographer, so I had to deal with him getting rejected from a lot of shows just because he was a photographer. And I actually found people saying things to me, and Jamie, I don't know if you've ever heard this or not, from people who do what I consider straight photography, which is going out and shooting a picture and making sure all the exposure is right and everything else, but they don't manipulate it whatsoever. They found my work, they didn't consider it photography. Even though the images I take could be standalone images, I just don't want to leave them alone. So it's just the way I look at my work. I want to compose it myself. So I haven't personally found any problem, and I don't I think there is a definite distinction between somebody who's doing commercial work and somebody who's doing artwork. Um, so,
But do you think that commercial work can be artistic or artwork?
oh well, absolutely. Some commercial work can be very artistic, and when you say commercial work, I mean it could be an album cover, it could be something as well. Maggie Taylor's a good example because her work was used on some television shows as the lead-in, and she's a photographer. She was married to Jerry Olsman for a long time. They're divorced now, but so yeah, I mean, there can be a crossover there. It's just
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you have anything to add or anything?
Yeah, I do, because I've done 2 album covers, so there's definitely a crossover. But I don't think that's new in the art world. You can go all the way back to Dali, Picasso. A lot of these people, they were working for the ballets, and they were doing a lot of endeavors. I think there is a distinction. The work that I would do, the work that I did for John Wesley Harding and the Decemberists, like for that album cover, was straight out of the box, not the sort of image that I would have done for myself. It was my image, it was my style, but there were other people who had input, and it was a different process. I think there is a gradient as well. And I completely agree with something Leslie said that I think is really interesting. I find that photography is one of the few mediums where people are really rigid and strict about how it has to be interpreted. And I think back to artists like Paul Baldridge, who was doing a lot of commercial work, and his commercial work is currently sold as fine artwork. So I think sometimes history tells the lie to the way we try to categorize and stigmatize how we interpret a medium. And it's really interesting that I think digital itself, maybe 15 or 20 years ago, was probably stigmatized, and now it's such a common tool that no one even thinks about it or talks about it.
Man, you guys are really just giving me these amazing segues. My next question, well, two things. I want to show a little bit of your work, from both of you. But while I'm kind of skimming through that, I'd like one at a time for you guys to tell me how technology has really changed the way that you do what you do. So I think what I'll do now is I will share my screen and we'll take a look at Jamie's work. Let's make sure I have that queued up here. Okie dokie. All right, so let's share screen. Baldridge, share. So Jamie, if you would like to tell me a little bit.
Yeah, that's not my work. I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
Oh my
Sorry.
God.
You say that's not mine? I don't know. That's an old piece. Gosh, yeah. This is some old work. Well, I sent you a mix of old and new.
Yeah.
Well, if you pause for a second, I could say, can you do that?
Yep.
Yeah. So if you go back one, especially, I think that'll be a better one to talk about.
Right.
All of my images, as I've looked at Leslie's work, which is just gorgeous and beautiful, and that's the sort of images that I sort of started with as well. And for me, it was more like a photo collage, photo montage. The images that I currently make, these are sort of film stills, and the environment that you see is completely synthetic. The person in the image is generally real, and all of the textures and things are real, but the environments are completely digitally built now. So it takes months to a year to sometimes a year and a half to complete a single image, to get all the modeling, texturing, lighting, positioning done, and we have to do multiple reshoots. But working this way gives me complete control over the final image. It appeals to the painter in me, it appeals to the technologist in me, it appeals to the photographer in me, the sculptor in me. So this is a way that I evolved into over about a 20-year period. So yeah.
Great. Awesome. All right. So let me bring us all back here. Here we are. Beautiful, beautiful. All right. So, Leslie, would you like to share your screen and show us a little bit of your work, and then tell me about how technology has evolved the way you make your work?
Yeah, hold on a second. Put it up there. Okay, so this is a new piece. Actually, it's a COVID-19 piece, and yeah. So Jamie, you're basically building your background. I'm using images that I've taken and then painting on them and building my backgrounds, and then putting the model in it that I've taken and changing the lighting and the color and everything else to create the storyline. So it's a similar process, but it's just I'm using whatever I've taken from an image that I've shot. So that actually was an incredible sunset and lots of fire, and the birds are from Avery Island. And so I just sort of set it together. It's called Fight or Flight. Um, so kind of relevant to today's what's going on today.
Absolutely. Do either of you have a favorite tool or favorite gadget that you use in your studio practice?
I just use Adobe, and I've been using it for so long, going back to.
Oh no. Hold on here.
No,
There we
Sorry.
go.
Sorry.
That's
there
okay.
we are.
Let's restart that question.
So I just use Adobe, and I use CC now, so it keeps it more up to date. Although it has its little quirks and bugs every time they update. And the way I work is not, even though they have a lot of bells and whistles now that you can pre-cut things, it doesn't always work. So I cut with a mouse. I since I taught for so long online and had to use my mouse all the time, I just got so used to using a mouse that I don't even use my Wacom tablet and my pen. So,
Just gonna ask for the mouse,
I'm
not
glad I'm not the only one.
I mean, I've been doing technology. I was one of the first online teachers, so way back.
this whole teaching from me thing is no big deal for you.
No, I mean, if I was still working, I'd be in great demand. But I decided when I retired. I said I would not do it anymore.
What
So
about you, Jamie? Do you have a favorite gadget or piece of tech?
Yeah, I've got a few now. I have 4 or 5D Mark IVs that I use generally when I shoot or film. All of them will be shooting or filming at the same time so that we can get reference shots from multiple angles. I use a DJI Mavic 2 Pro drone for a lot of footage and photography now. Multiple motorized gimbal systems. I design and build my own computer systems now as well. So and the funny part is I began as a darkroom photographer 20 years ago working with a Vissner View camera and refused to even try to use Photoshop. And as of today, I use more programs than I could even list right here, from Adobe Photoshop to Maya to PF Track to a lot of programs and software that are just for that archaeologists generally use, and I've found uses for them in scanning large data sets from landscapes and from traveling overseas to digitally reconstruct later. So it has evolved so much for me. I'm working with virtual reality now as well, so I'm always looking for the next thing that will get me excited and that will get the work up to the next level. I just want a new challenge. I like to learn how to push things in a new direction while still making them look like they belong with all of my work from even 20 years ago.
It's fantastic. Thank you for sharing that. Um, what I want to close out the interview for both of you with is I want to know, who are your art heroes?
oh God. Oh,
Good question.
this is going to sound really arrogant, but I do not have a specific art hero. I admire so many artists for what they do, and especially when you have somebody like Clyde Connell up in Shreveport who, worked until she was 93 or something, out living in a house with no air conditioning, and really got her career going when she was in her 70s. So, I just admire a lot of different people's art. So I can't say one person or two people or even that many,
Sure. What about you, Jamie? Do you have an art hero?
Yeah, I have a few. Jerry Yulesman was a huge influence on me, and we've been friends for years. I've known him a while. I love Leonora Carrington. She's somebody who really influenced me a lot. Frida Kahlo, and the old classics, Salvador Dali, but some new people like Gregory Crewdson, who I really, really appreciate. And
part of me totally knew you would say Dali.
What's that?
I said part of me totally knew you would say Dali.
Oh, I do. I mean, everybody thinks it's cliche, but I fell in love with him. And one of those things is that's what introduced me to art. Everyone sees sort of persistence of memory when they're a kid, I guess, in a poster shop. Mm-hmm. And it was, I grew up in a very small town and had never been to a museum until I was 22 years old. So that was my first sort of exposure to art, was seeing like a Dali poster. So yeah, it's cliche, but I still love it. There's a craftsmanship there. There's sort of a mania and a madness that I still appreciate.
Absolutely. I mean, one of my favorite artists of all time is Michelangelo. So
there you go. Great choice.
Yeah.
Great choice.
Yeah, I often say that if I had lived back in ye olde time, he would be my art boyfriend for sure.
Oh yeah.
Well, that'd be a little hard since.
Yeah, I don't think he'd have been interested in you, Kelsey.
Yeah, no, I know. A girl can dream. Okay.
I'm sorry.
I find it interesting, Jamie, the ones you picked, because those are definitely ones. I did not grow up in the country. I grew up in New Orleans. So we had Delgado, although it didn't have that great of a collection. And my mother had art books in the house, even though she wasn't artistic at all. So I got to look at a lot of artwork as a kid.
Yeah, I did not. But, it was a good thing, though, because once I sort of did discover art, it was such a feast. It's like you didn't realize you'd been famished for so long, and I've been hungry for this thing for so long, that when I found it, I knew exactly what I was going to do with my life. It clicked. So, yeah.
Well, thank you both so much. I really appreciate you taking the time to chat with me today and let our audience know what it is you do and why. Also for your patience for all of the tech troubleshooting that we've been doing. It's going to get easier, everyone. I promise. Any last words you want to say before we close out?
Just thanks a lot, Kelsey.
Leslie, it was nice meeting you. I love your work. I think it's beautiful. And Kelsey, thank you so much for hosting this.
Hey, no problem. Thanks, everybody. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.